What if we could impart our principles and lessons to inspire others' legacies? Welcome this lovely morning to the Design Your Legacy podcast. My name is Angelina Carlton. I'm the hostess, and I have the pleasure to introduce you to Spencer Hilligoss. He is the Chief Operating Officer, CEO of Madison Investing, a real estate investment club with bespoke, curated real estate deals. He founded Madison Investing with a singular mission to help busy, successful professionals invest passively, secure their most valuable asset of all, time. Welcome, Spencer.
Angelina, thank you so much for having me on. Honored to be here.
It is my pleasure. And I look forward to talking with you further. I know that one of the things that we spoke about in our preamble is that I might classify you in the millennial generation, and therefore you're making wonderful milestones and strides and now have this opportunity, now that you've become financially independent, to think about things like legacy, designing an intentional life, and just reflecting on all this stuff that sometimes business professionals don't slow down or don't kind of have, what I talked about, like, is like the dining room conversations or the kitchen table conversations.
Totally. And by the way, I completely claim the elder millennial title with pride. It's a broad generation, and there's enough gray in here for my kids already, just to prove that point. But yeah, the conversations around the dinner table, that's a very timely topic for us. We're all about family, and the journey that I've been on, which is deeply rooted in legacy, Angelina, as a driver, has been one that led me now to running this business, this investing club, along with my co-founder, who's also my wife, Jennifer Mormoto. And we've designed our lives around family as the priority first, coming from two full-time careers of 13 years and very demanding, well-paying, lucrative jobs and careers with ladder climbing involved and all the titles and pageantry that comes along with that. But at the other side of it, a lot of learnings about how to really reorganize, redesign, and like put life at the forefront as opposed to work at the forefront, and everything that follows from there.
Yes. So if you would take our listeners through your journey, not just from Silicon Valley to where you are today, but also one of the things I brought up was like the shifts in mindset, because I think your dad was a real estate broker growing up. And there was this idea of, well, you can't lose your shirt in real estate. And so you had to work through some different limiting beliefs to get to where you're at. So could you walk us through that journey?
Absolutely. And you're spot on. My dad was a broker for 30 years, and that was my first exposure to what it meant to work, right? Our parents are models for us, whether we know it or like it or not, early in life, for all of us. And so from then, my dad would have me working early on. Doesn't count when you're 6 years old, working in a real estate business, of course. That's not big time experience. But as a teenager, years later, working open houses, et cetera, seeing how entrepreneurs worked, seeing the volatility of that real estate business, that one source of income, active income, really prompted me to go look into tech companies, frankly. And it was much cooler to tell my friends at that time I was going to go work at tech companies. So, I think the limiting beliefs, I love that phrase. It's such an important one in terms of mindset shift that I took away from an early stage of life. And I'll say this without going too far into it, because I don't want to make it too grim. But during that time, formative beliefs formed, right? Like when you're growing up, you're in your family, you're watching your parents carve their own way, if they're working, mom, dad, or both, or otherwise. I saw my dad grinding 4:30 a.m. to make very strong income, flying high, top broker in the top 5 nationally for his brokerage. But we hit a really tough patch for 10 years. We referred to it in our family as like the dark decade. And without being too grim, I'll just say, lost a younger teenage brother to cancer, lost 2 other grandparents at that time. Like the hits kept on coming. In life,
Which is real life.
which is real life. That's right.
Yeah, and I know,
That's exactly right.
and I know I'm interrupting right now, but it's interesting because it's almost this idea, maybe subconsciously planted, that you were going to go like from that to the tech world where there's stability, and then you came to realize something else. But I'll let you continue to tell your story.
No, you're spot on though, right? And I think you just kind of honed in on something that, frankly, I don't think a lot of people catch if I share that little TMI story, Angelina, which is that my perception was, okay, dad goes and builds business, just like the majority of other people out there, their salary job or they're working for themselves. One source of income, substantial, but one source of income for that household. So what happens when life occurs, right? When disruption, something serious happens? Well, my example from what I saw was a major downsizing in lifestyle. And over the course of years, our family had to downsize. My dad's income was deeply impacted by that era. And I took those lessons, and that belief was formative for me. And I didn't know how to act on that yet. for years. You know, I still went through college. I started my career figuring out how to function in the professional world in the office job. But all that to say, I kept this key learning in my mind. I just didn't know how to resurface it till many years later, which was that one source of income for a household that is actively earned trading time for money is the riskiest way one can build a legacy for themselves and their family.
Yeah, and can I
So
interrupt on that for a moment?
please.
Thank you for going deep and being vulnerable, because I know in your other podcasts that I've watched, it's very real estate oriented, and you're talking
Yes.
about cap rates, and we're going to go there in a moment regarding like repurposing commercial properties and REITs and syndication and all those lovely topics. But I find it so interesting because I presume maybe one of your parents was a residential real estate broker.
He was, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and he was
so
selling residential in the peninsula in Northern California.
oh, okay. Okay, interesting. I didn't know that you were from California. I thought maybe you were from Denver. So, and I had shared with you that before I started in this capacity as a legacy planner, I worked in real estate. And so one of the things
Mhm.
many people don't know is within residential real estate, it's like feast and famine. So during the spring and the summer and the fall, it's fantastic. But then it dries up November, December, February, and it's a very big shift, and absolutely, how do you process that as someone who's growing up? Because one of the things, and I might be grim here, but I'm just going to blurt out and say it, that many people don't talk about, that poverty is one of the greatest forms of violence,
Mm, that's a
because to
great
go without,
phrase. Yeah.
yeah, it's not necessarily which of my 5 sneakers would I like to choose today, Reebok, Nike, Adidas. It's, well, I'm wearing shoes from 10 years ago.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
I mean, but you're capturing something in terms of feast or famine, and it hits so many more industries than I think a lot of people realize. Perhaps they just haven't hit it yet. I'm not trying to be, forbearing here, but um, that tapping into that experience, it's easy for me to tell that story now in hindsight, right? Like anything else, the biggest learnings and turning points that have occurred in my life professionally and most importantly personally have come after tough times, big challenges, headwinds, whatever we want to call them. And that, fasting a little bit forward into my career, like I got into tech as a kid who didn't necessarily find business that interesting, frankly. I never cared that much about finance. I eventually got really interested in business late in college, like many years later as an okay student. All those things emerge from someone via what they experience in the world. And for me, getting into tech companies, 5 companies deep in finance, in fintech or financial tech companies, that was an eye opener for me to realize I'd been working for 10 years in Silicon Valley when I finally realized, wait, this unspoken, unwritten playbook of Silicon Valley, if folks aren't familiar, is like, hey, what maybe if I could join a really early stage tech company, I get some equity in the next Google or Uber or Facebook, now Meta. I can have my get out of jail free card for all my financial sins that have occurred thus far, right? And that's just not the reality for the vast majority of people that work in those companies, as you know, Angelina. And so I think for me, like it came to a point where uh, my wife and co-founder Jennifer, she and I were raising our infant son, the first of two, and I was working at the most, let's just say, focused, earliest stage, quote unquote, rocket ship VC funded tech company that I worked for, and this is a few years ago. But I didn't see my infant son for a couple of weeks during that period of time. I was going in early, I was coming home late, and that's really that first true spark as a professional adult in the working world, managing teams of people with big expectations, dumping money into 401ks, making great salary, et cetera, not seeing an off ramp, not seeing risk mitigation, not seeing a path to where I could actually spend meaningful time with that first of our 2 boys now. And we just committed to ourselves. We're like, this is really hard. And clearly not delusional. I know there's much harder walks of life out there and people have incredibly challenging experiences. In that moment for us, that was an eye opener.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
so,
think what you're referring to is like that mouse on the wheel. And you're like, is this it? I can't keep doing this. I'm burning out. I'm missing the real life moments. And then
absolutely.
and those are the moments sometimes where you don't necessarily see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think maybe that's what motivated, and I'm going to move to the next question in a moment. But I know in my research with some of your prior podcasts, you mentioned like spending weekends with your wife, looking at a whiteboard and gaming out what is the magic number. But a lot of couples and people will not set aside that time in personal development to get real, to say, hey, things look glamorous on the outside, but the real stuff, I'm missing out on. So even if it looks great with the salary, whatever the six-figure number was for Silicon Valley, if your soul feels empty, that's a very truthful, honest conversation. And some people dodge it.
Yes, I mean, I would argue most people do, unfortunately, but you're spot on. And I really appreciate you listening to that prior conversation, Angelina. I mean, so what you're referring to there, that planning weekend, it was actually 2 weekends, as you said, Jennifer and I, this is, I don't know, 8 years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago now. We took a whole weekend, had kids at a sitter, and we literally pulled out sticky notes. It was like doing a planning meeting inside of a company, shockingly nerdy from our perspective, which I think was a good thing because Jennifer had her own corporate career. So we have the language of business in common, at least, to go into what most people think is a terrifying conversation as a married couple.
I would
And
have loved to have seen an image of the Post-it notes on the whiteboard.
oh, I mean, it's funny in hindsight because I can like really reflect on. I remember so many of them, and they were pretty simple, but like from to as simple frameworks, right? Like, where are we now? Where do we want to be? A lot of that linked to the most basic goal setting objectives, which is how much do we have income now? How much income do we want to have? And by when? And active income, passive income, and these phrases we're talking at a very high level. So I know even if we do get to things like cap rates, et cetera, which, I mean, we certainly don't need to if you don't want to go there. I like nerding out on real estate, but not everyone does. I think income and setting a target was the single most powerful exercise that we did. And it was so simple. It was saying, how long do we need, take off all time constraints, to hit a certain number of income per month, income that we didn't have to work for. And we gave ourselves 15 years, right? And that sounds absurd. That sounds so far out. It sounds like almost demotivating. So we came back 2 weeks later and we were like, how do we chop that number in half? And then we went from there. But there was crying, there was reconciliation, there was laughter, there was every range of emotions during those planning sessions, despite the business structures and acumen put around them, because you had to get real.
Yeah, well, I think what you're referring to is we have, like you in your bio, we have such a short amount of time in this lifetime. So those emotions are going to come up of, is this really how I'm going to spend my time? Or will I have the courage? And one of the things you've spoken about is that courage to step beyond your comfort zone, whether that was in your first few real estate deals or even as the deals got larger and bigger. But I think, yeah, it's brilliant. And some people, they don't claim that personal agency. They don't have that moment of just pure determination to say, I'm going to look at this head on and make it through the tunnel, no matter what we have to process emotionally to get to the other side. And whether that means cutting back for a little while. Like a lot of times people don't realize that people that get to financial independence made sacrifices. Like I think Robert Kiyosaki talked about how he lived in a friend's basement for a year or two or three. I don't know the exact details, but that's not glamorous. That's not something you can brag on with your friends of like, yeah, I'm grown. And I think he was he had been honorably discharged from the Marine Corps, and now he's living in a friend's basement. Like on the outside, somebody could pass incredible judgment on him and call him the L word loser. And all the while, he had this vision of, I'm going to make something better of myself than what I've seen to this point, and I'm going to have the courage to do it.
Yeah. Oh man, you hit on so many good points there, Angelina. I think it has to be said for building legacy, building wealth in general. Not saying I know every answer out there, but I will say that this has worked for us, is the fundamentals of, there's not a need to go keep up with the Joneses, because ultimately, do you want to look rich or be rich, right? Do you want to actually build wealth by being frugal? And do you really need to go buy that new car, expand your means and live within them at the same time? Like all of these are core principles that really were brain transplants of sorts for us that we had to make because we were very conditioned to doing the salary work. But ultimately, yeah, we drove, and we still proudly will drive, like one of our two cars is a used car. There's no reason to sell it. It still runs great. We have a busy life, right? Like these are fundamentals for some of those things beyond just saying comfort zone. Oh my goodness. I read on the point of education, like once I realized I cared enough about this topic, and Jennifer and I were getting into these formative conversations about how to go and plan our life and move forward, I went all in and probably call it an obsession for a little while. Sure.
Was focused.
I was focused. Exactly right. I'm not a night owl. I'm an early bird. I was waking up from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. before going into lead teams with people and deliver on my obligations as a manager and leader in a day job. But I read 24 books on these topics in an 18-month period, and I listened to 400 plus podcasts, much like the one like we're on here right now, which were vital in education. I did not need to do that much. I mean, it was 3 books would have cut it versus 24. I was procrastinating after a while, but as an indicator to hit the point right on, which is like, those were helping me push through that comfort zone of realizing there's just other ways to think about this. And I was looking at it so incredibly narrowly. And I think, unfortunately, most people are, and even more unfortunately, most people will forever stay that way. So like the few that can hear the message, like anyone can truly look outside that comfort zone and push. It really does come down to what's the catalyst, what's the spark, the reason why they're doing it, and then are they going to commit to taking action against it?
Yeah. What I find so interesting in what you just shared is I almost wonder if you had to have a support network in the very beginning. And maybe if you didn't, then the books and the podcasts were kind of like
Mm.
your landscape, your ecosystem. Because if somebody says, I'd like to step out of not being one of the Joneses, like, okay, come line right up at my front door. Who else wants to join me? Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like you meet
And
those people later on, but in the first beginning part, it's an isolating journey sometimes.
very much so. It's a wonderful point. I mean, I will add that the echo chamber, yeah, the soundboard, whatever metaphor we want to use for that, right? The education is part of that journey, but so is I did have one helpful leg up that I found because a mentor led me to my final W-2 job. I was leading teams at a real estate tech company, and I saw, this is probably one of the most powerful catalysts for me to go and actually create our business. And I saw some of the folks that I was managing, like hardworking, brilliant folks, not that much younger, or I'm maybe 5-7 years older than them, right? Roughly close in years. And I saw them stick around at the end of long work days. And I knew their performance. They were excellent at their jobs. These were strong performing professionals, right? And they would stick around as the lights went off. And a few of them, maybe 3 or 5, 2 groups of them, would work on projects. And I didn't know what they were working on. I love the culture of the last company I was with in W-2 because they would embrace side hustles. They would allow, they didn't mind if employees were doing that in the office. And they certainly didn't mind if they were doing that while employed. So, chalk one up for progressive companies. But I would say that I saw them and I was like, they're building something. And it turns out they were 2 separate businesses with people on my teams while performing in their day job. They go out, they build their own businesses, of which both are now thriving years later. And I was sitting there going, well, why can't I do it? They're doing it. They have strengths. I have strengths. We all do. And so like, there's really nothing stopping me. It's just a matter of, frankly, action, perception, and comfort zone.
Oh, that is deep and wonderful. Well said. So I would imagine that some of your business and life lessons may have been around education through the books and the podcasts, having mentors. What else were some of the life and business lessons?
Yeah. How long do you got? I think I want to bring this up because I think it doesn't come across immediately for most conversations, which is I was not a business interested kid, and I wasn't finance or investing or money oriented. I mean, to the degree where, I grew up playing in bands, in punk rock bands and like very, very contrarian is the bottom line. And I think contrarian thinking gets a lot of different labels and associations, but right now I'm so deeply grateful for that kind of ethos, that just contrarian thinking, because in the end,
Because you
yeah,
could question something.
yes, exactly right. Because you can question, not only can you question something, but you lean into it hard enough and you can question everything. And there's certain things that after you look at them briefly, you're like, hey, I don't need to question that. Things in my book that are unquestioned are like, do the right thing, right? Do the right thing. Operate with integrity, build long-term relationships. These are all things that absolutely just are like unflinching commitments. And I strive to deliver on them daily and role model for my kids, right? But I think that humbling oneself gets easier as a second point. It gets easier with life because life humbles you in so many wonderful ways, including your kids, like when they come up and remind you, hey, you got to go to the gym. But humbling through experience and just going out and being comfortable, being deeply uncomfortable. I know we've talked a number of times about comfort zone, but diving into something that you know nothing about, but you want to go learn, and you realize someone else knows this more than I do. So I need to go find someone. I need to go find a mentor. I need to go find a teacher, find a coach, of which I have found immense value in multiple times, particularly on this journey. I mean, I've worked with, like, I think 3 different paid coaching programs over time. And so mentors come from all sources. And I think that's humbling oneself in, in line with their teachings or whatever they want to be able to bring to your conversation is pivotal. But I'm not even sure if that answers your question.
I think it does, because there must be a blessing in disguise that you were humbled growing up in your childhood and upbringing, that now as an adult, it's one of your key strengths.
Oh, I appreciate that perspective. Yeah. I think value sets from parents help for sure. Also having, even when I got to corporate career, you meet the bosses you work for, both the ones that are incredible in your mind, like you idolize them, and they role model excellence. You learn a lot from them. You'll learn even more from the opposite. And it just has to be said that I think, one of the key learnings as well, and I'm just going to bring this up because I think being vulnerability is one of those things that is the most helpful things that I've appreciated from learning from people further along the path than I am. And I am deep introvert. A lot of people like to claim that they're introverts. It has nothing to do with being shy. You could be loud introvert. And that's kind of where I put myself. So why do I bring that up? I think a lot of people hold on to that in a way that holds them back for a very long time.
The
Um,
label, or just that comfort zone of, this is my personality and I can't change?
I think both. To your question, and I bring it up because I think about the first job that I took, like first full-time office job, was an inside sales job, and terrifying, terrifying. And I did it because I was like, well, my dad could do salesy type stuff. Maybe I can too, even though I really don't want to, but let me just go do it. And turned out, yeah, I had to do it my way. And we all have to do things our own way and figure out an experience. But frankly, had I not done that, I wouldn't have talked to 10,000 plus people over the course of 2 years and getting everything that goes into the, going in the world of doing any kind of growth or sales role. You accelerate quickly. You learn rejection quickly. You learn how to get no's by the thousands quickly. And that compounds and accelerates everything about the wonderful learning on like that specific type of front. So I just wanted to give that example for folks, because I think that that's something I cherish. It does. Some of the fastest growth doesn't feel good at the time. In fact, I would say most of it hurts at the time. And then you come back to it and you're like, well, gee, that worked really well. It wasn't very fun, but it worked really well. And I'm deeply grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're pointing to is, because I'm also an introvert, it's that message of, you're going to have to talk to people.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you're going to have to talk to them a lot, especially if you want to build a legacy of any substance, and
Well, absolutely, absolutely, and you're absolutely spot on. Also, that the lessons that come with it, once the roller coaster starts, it's amazing. It's not that scary to leave the tracks at the beginning.
right. I mean, it's terrifying in the hours leading up to it, but when you're in the moment, you're like, oh, this is actually pretty great, and
Yeah.
but it's also the key learning for a lot of folks, like you and I know that you shared your one as well, is it's energy management. And it's energy management more than it is about shyness, because I think a lot of people tend to misinterpret that. And I'm going to pick on every extrovert on the planet right now, including my better half, which is like, they will forever think it has to do with not wanting to go do something. That's separate. This is about energy management. And at least for me, it's like, I cherish this conversation one-to-one, in depth. I find it that we can have like a really meaningful conversation. Hopefully some of the audience can also take something away from it too, Angelina. But at the same time, walking into a networking floor at a conference, which I had to do a few months ago, and I spoke in front of a conference, terrifying. Draining, terrifying. So I have to manage that. I have to prepare for that, So we don't have to go fully into the introvert world, but I'll just say that it's one of those things about comfort zone. I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, they just stop short because they think they are static, and this comes very much into like I think it was Carol Dweck who wrote the growth mindset, static mindset, growth mindset. everyone is capable of far more than they realize. And I think that the growth mindset is one of those things that allows you to charge forth. And no, you're not going to do stuff perfectly. I'm not going to do stuff perfectly. But if I want to stay the way I am, all I have to do is just keep doing exactly what I've been doing.
Yeah.
That's guaranteed.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking into that. And before I move on to the next question, I just want to slow down for a moment to say that I think it's brilliant that you spoke into that, because there are other introverts in this world that if they hear your story of not just making it a best practice in your career, but then being able to speak on stage, they know they won't die if they go to the other side, right?
Right.
And
Right.
it is a very internal experience of, like you said, it's energy management, and there's also maybe some elements of like, well, is my identity still okay if that other person rejects me, or that room rejects me, or
Right.
something of the unknown happens in those surprises, and I'll still be okay. And I think you've spoken to it before, that that the thicker skin is developed, and you grow with it, and your skin gets thicker and thicker and thicker, but there'll always be a part of you inside that goes, oh my gosh, this again.
That's right. And just knowing that that's like, you nailed it. And that's something you acknowledge, and you just know it's always going to be there. Like, I mean, in some way, you just get better at managing it. Simple as
Yeah.
that.
Yes. So now that you have the freedom from a typical 9 to 5, what would you like to design for your life? Like, what would the final day of your life look like if there could be a vision for it? And also, let's say for generations to come.
Oh, that's a fun question. I would say, and I get to use a real time example because this has been a long time coming for designing legacy, but also lifestyle design. Um, on July 1st of this year, for example, like our whole family with our 2 young boys, like we're going to live in Portugal for 6 weeks. And that comes as the result of many years and hard work and all this stuff we've been discussing so far, Angelina. And this is one thing we're going to go and basically, like, are we nervous about doing that? Sure. Are we doing it because we get to go and expose our children to a broader worldview, to spend time with our kids? And we're not going to vacation. We're going there to work part-time while they are doing like education, school. It's a pretty cool program. And this is just one of what will be a stepping stone to perhaps like an annual trip we'll take for a number of years and then beyond, and that, if nothing else, in terms of legacy for me, speaks to acting as the role modeling, like the true role modeling of work and life integration, the true role modeling of like, I can tell our kids whatever I'm going to tell them. Science and every data source on this topic shows that they listen to some of what we say, but what they absolutely follow and match what we do. And I think that is what we are literally doing. And we've redesigned our whole lives around being able to go do a trip like this, and it's just one example. That's a fresh one, but yeah, we're picking a more English speaking friendly country. We're not taking them straight to Tokyo on the first one. And they're pretty young. We're talking about a 9-year-old and a normal 6-year-old, so I bring that up because ultimately, if we do this right, like the ideal day will be a continuation of this type of dynamic over the course of many years. But the boys won't want to come with us probably when they're in their teenage years. That's for sure. But down the line, the options, the freedom, the wealth enabled freedom and foundation, the passive income that comes from many different wonderful sources over time, it gives you autonomy. Like cash is the oxygen, cash flow is the oxygen of life in this capitalist society that we all live in. Not to be too dramatic, but that's just kind of how it works. And I think everyone, if they thought about that phrase long enough, would come to agree with that. So that's really it. It's like, in action, financial freedom, enabling lifestyle by design, and spending more time with family is the priority.
Yeah. Well, it's very honest. Thank you. Because money is definitely access. It's better experiences. It's better food. It's better, vacations. And that's kind of like what I say is the pink elephant in the room. A lot of times people don't want to come out and say, yeah, money is powerful. And you don't have to necessarily love money in terms of that expression. It's not, money isn't evil, it's the love of money, or what
Yes,
Christians sometimes refer to as the spirit of mammon. um and it's prevalent. I mean, it's the waters we swim in. So to be able to talk about it, I think is brilliant, because a lot of times people don't want to even like bring up the M word, money. And yeah, and so
absolutely.
yeah, so one of the reasons why I wanted to ask this question is because you're young, and I mentioned in an email over to you in the Word document that I had a great grandfather, And he was very successful during the Great Depression. He was an insurance broker. He drove multiple Cadillacs. He had multiple homes. He had a maid, et cetera, et cetera. He was able to set aside money for his two sons, one that became a physician, and the other one, who's my grandfather, received his PhD from Harvard. Now, if you wonder why I'm bringing up the story, is why didn't he write a book for his generations to come? And the answer is because he didn't know. So
Mm.
here I am, 4 generations down the line, and I'm saying, come on, Herbert Carlton, where is that hardcover coffee table book, or where is the best life and business lessons? Now, he did tell my dad, who would have then been 3rd generation, to go buy land. Now, did my dad do that?
I think
No, no. So
didn't do
he didn't
it.
do it. And I'm not saying that if he bought land, that would have been like the be all end all. He did get his PhD. He did have a successful career. But I think that there was something maybe that fell through the cracks that Herbert could have, because he was the brave one in some ways.
Mm.
He was the one that pushed through in a landscape of the Great Depression. And we look at the landscape now, I don't know what we call today, in terms of the inflation and the every poly crisis in the world. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I posed that question, kind of to plant a seed and inquiry that you might think, well, who am I to build something or design something qualitatively as well as quantitatively? But again, it's like I wanted not Richard, but Herbert Carlton to do something, but I don't think people knew then that it would have been important, or that 4 generations down we would have looked for answers. Yeah.
Completely. I mean, you're hitting on the topic that ultimately, I think if I had to pick for what I would like to leave behind more than anything else for our family and for our boys and beyond, is the gift of education, in addition to, whatever resources, but really like the education and blueprint, which is what you're hitting on, Angelina. I mean, like the lack of some form of blueprint or playbook or whatever we want to brand it. Um, that is so lacking for most people. And we will tend to want to seek out answers later. Unfortunately, at least I'll speak for myself. Like by the time we hit that emotional maturity and financial awareness, like oftentimes we've missed like a decade or two of great potential to be able to do something about it. And the conversation about money, I really appreciate you saying that like people are afraid to talk about the M word. Like without going on a soapbox here, I'll just say that sit down at the table with our boys and have dinner like last night and say, time to talk about cash flow, guys. But what we will say is, at least if they, let's say, went to a bake sale today. This is actually a fresh example. Want to go to a bake sale, wanted to buy hot cocoa and a cookie. How much money do you want to use? Bring the change back. Those really minor, tiny conversations, they're going to be different for a person out there who has grown children, if they're 30, 40 and beyond, or at my age. But it starts early. And then keeping that thread going and giving educational playbooks to the people you care about in your life, that is something I care about deeply. And so that is part of what we're going to be working on and are actively working on as well. It's just like, how do we go and share that type of education, not just for our own kids, but also with other people within our network and beyond? Because it's not, that's the thing. You already know this too, Angelina. It's not rocket science. It's really just a series of principles and learnings and habits that people can change over time.
Yeah, I want to bring up 2 things that what you just shared, which is the first being that I think one of the blessings, again, I'm going to go back to your upbringing, because you weren't rich. I bet you have the respect that you're willing to give to other people, and also to show your children the respect they can give if somebody chooses not to have the 5 sneakers. And I bring this up because I've met some children that come from affluent families, and they don't want to be associated with those who are poor, or they don't want to mingle or mix with those who are poor, forgetting that there could be some type of lesson, or it's a character building conversation or something, to look beyond just the surface or of what our eyes can see, but to realize that I'm just bringing that up because that also comes with money. It's like, well, who's worthy to talk to us, or who's
Right.
worthy, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, or to have the compassion of, well, I don't have, or like, I know, like, you have multi-family apartments, but if that tenant can't pay, not to look at them as if, like, with judgment.
Yeah. I mean, as humans, frankly, I think you're hitting on a, man, this could be its own podcast from my perspective. I'm very passionate on this topic, but thank you for, for acknowledging that. At least I'd like to think that's the case. As I know, you certainly encounter wonderful people who, it's a cherished relationship in your life, personally, professionally, and they might even think about that in their life and in the world that way right now. But I always think of it like keeping oneself humble, in the context of life can change, and life can change for anyone, and it can change so rapidly. Let's just, I encourage anyone out there not to get too ahead of themselves in terms of where they think that they're at in terms of, high pedestals, because we're all ultimately humans in the same world together. And this is going to turn into a philosophical debate pretty soon, or a preaching session. But, when you mentioned apartments and like real estate, great example. Just quick anecdote, early when we started buying rentals as real estate owners, because we own real estate, as you said, one of the first tenants that we got sent like a really heartfelt note. And it was, this is like a C-class property, so they work for their money. They have to, and we keep the rent reasonable for them. But they sent us this really nice note, and all we did was meet them halfway on paying for like a new fence. And it really, really changed the situation for them with this one place they were staying. And like, I just bring that up because like, this is actually something I literally talk about in our investing club too, is that, man, we're very much a capitalist, and I enjoy, that wealth building process myself and all the things we've been discussing, but wealth is transferred amongst humans. And I think in the end, if you're investing in an asset, such as the one that people live in, you better believe that there's like a reason to sit there and think about what are you providing for what you are taking out of this asset, And so anyways, we're going to go down a real estate talk if I'm not too careful.
Yes, no problem. I just want to say one other thing, and then I'll move on to the next question for the sake of time. But the other point I wanted to bring up is I think it's brilliant that you spoke about the hard times at the very beginning, even if it might be, quote, TMI, because if your children can understand how you built again, or how you were able to have coping skills, whether it's life skills or survival skills, I think that's also something that needs to be unpacked, because sometimes the next generation is expected to be brilliant and to have all the answers, and yet they might not be able to read your mind in terms of osmosis. So I think being able to also to talk about the hard times as well as the great times equal out in that sharing of knowledge and opportunity, or the transfer of knowledge, whether it's emotional intelligence and life skills that allow them to say, okay, well, I can also be prepared for those hard times.
Oh, so well said.
Okay. Well, I'll bring up the next business question. And the business question is, and I'll go over to the light side now and make it kind of easy. So what are you doing differently, given that you see the market and your customers' needs and what others have done who have gone before you?
So say that one more time. I want to make sure that I get it, because I don't know if I got it.
So from a business perspective, what is it that you're doing differently today when you see other apartment owners and investors, or those that have gone before you?
Cool. Yeah, thank you. So I think simply said, being comfortable with the boring path. And I think that what I mean by that is we are all so conditioned as investors, as well as just, entrepreneurs, to go and seek, like, we're doing this ultimately not because it's fun alone. We're doing this for enterprise, right? We're doing this for industry. We're doing this because we want to go generate wealth, or solve a problem in the market of some sort. Therefore, the market's going to pay us back for that perceived value. All that to say, one of the things at our core that has kept our compass, our figurative compass, aimed correctly, in my opinion, and huge credit to my better half and co-founder Jennifer on this as well, is ultimately being patient, taking our time, not diving into things. When it comes to partnerships, it takes a lot of friends and partners in business to go and do things like buy $20 million apartment buildings, right? And a lot more in some cases. So in the end, who you choose to work with is ultimately going to be one of the biggest determinants of future success in my experience. And we have been very patient and very deliberate in how we make that choice, and putting our own capital at risk to do that oftentimes, every time, frankly, before we decide to go and share those types of assets for investment with our investing club, So like putting skin in the game, basic thing, like investing your own capital, putting that at risk, taking months to vet and sit there and get to know, not like interview style, but like really get to know the people that we're going to be getting into very large real estate transactions with over the course of years. And if this were the equivalent of dating and marriage, then like I think a lot of people, just to use this as the analogy, like they're very comfortable getting into like speed dating in terms of partnerships, and even like what are the clients they want to take on, and they say, oh, short-term need, must get revenue, I will go and take on this client. Maybe they don't really get along that well with them, maybe they're really high demand, or maybe I'm going to go take on this partnership with a really excellent real estate partner on the other side of the country. I'll see them 2 to 3 times a year in person, but otherwise we're going to rely on phone conversations and a deep relationship, or a 8 to 10 figure business transaction. Like something remarkable like that. And to belabor the point, just to say, taking one's time to truly say, let's do less better. Because if you're constantly acting and constantly doing, you don't have time to reflect and think, how did that go? So not to keep it too philosophical, but I do think that like it's all about the who, not how, to also give credence to the book that's out there, which is excellent. Choose your partners wisely, and that takes time.
Yeah. I think one of the things, if somebody hasn't done real estate investing in the capacity or the context of commercial real estate, I think one of the things they don't realize is when you get involved in deals with other people, it's almost like a marriage in a sense, because if it goes wrong, the lawsuits and is the whole other side. Yeah, like there's the
Yes.
front side of the hand, which you said, oh, the money is fantastic, but the back side is like, oh, if it doesn't go well, you could find yourself like, and I know it's like it's a metaphoric business divorce, but it could be something that could either be really great or really,
You're spot on. Absolutely spot
and
on.
that's
And
what a
and,
lot
and
of
it
people
lasts for
don't know on the
years.
outside.
Yeah. And I mean, to double down on it briefly, I'll just say that I'm grateful to have gone through, in the entrepreneurship circle, and also I would even say within wealthier circles. Oftentimes the W-2, like a salaried career of any type, is kind of like looked down upon, right? And in my experience, I cherish that journey because I had frankly, it was net positive, despite the hardship moments that were catalysts for me to go into entrepreneurship. I cherish that journey because you can go skin your knees and learn these lessons about what you and I just talked about in ways that are not devastating to one's entire financial livelihood or life. And I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people at different elevations of leadership, but I've done that on the company's salary and for the purpose of growing those companies. Do I apply those learnings directly into behavioral interviews, vetting financials, vetting their backgrounds, doing background checks and all people? Absolutely. And I really think that, want to give credit to where it's due for people that are in the corporate world or working world, thinking about legacy building, and just to say, you're learning relevant skills that apply far beyond your day job. It is a choice as to how you apply them beyond that, though.
Yes. So how do you define the word legacy? And will your legacy be real estate or something else? Another
Oh
hidden
man,
dream.
I'm sure that there will be some legacy real estate within there in terms of holdings. That we So the answer would be yes on that front. I think that the biggest imprint, and you're probably not going to be as surprised by this answer, Angelina, but legacy to me means, are we, as a parent, this is not going to be the same answer for a person who's not a parent. As a parent, it means raising net positive humans on planet Earth. To give the most financial framing answer to a parenting question ever. Are we raising our boys, and are we impacting the people in our lives, in our immediate families, and also our extended families, in ways that leaves our principles intact, and hopefully they take those with them. And I think ultimately that is what legacy means to me, is principles in action, as well as education by experience that could be passed along. So hopefully some of those experiences can also lead to some learning. Like education is a wonderful way to learn things. I think experience is the best teacher, but if there's ways to avoid painful experience as a teacher, and we can pass those things along, that's what I consider legacy first. And then of course there will be assets in form of real estate, probably, and a few other things.
Yes. In addition to your wife, who inspires you?
I mean, it'd be unfair not to just say, I think in hindsight, we all want to go off and carve our own path differently than our parents. But I have to say that my dad's work ethic in hindsight, watching him do what he did. And even now, I'd say that inspired me. I would also say that the folks that, that I mentioned earlier, the entrepreneurs who I'm more inspired now than ever by the entrepreneurs who are, I would say, younger than me, right? Like the folks who worked for me at the company that I was at last, or even the folks who are like taking inspiration is one of those things that I have become very open-minded on like a equal access across the board. It can come from up, down, sideways, or beyond. And I think right now what inspires me more than ever, frankly, outside my immediate family, loved ones, friends, are the earlier entrepreneurs who are looking at the landscape of 2023 and going, we have to they have to make a whole new model for how they operate in the professional world. What does the professional world look like in years to come? And so I take inspiration from a lot of those different directions, but it starts at family first, and then expands out from there.
That's lovely. Is your dad still alive to know that he inspired you?
Yes.
Oh, cool, cool. Oh,
Yeah.
that's sweet. Um, so what scares you about your legacy and what gives you hope?
Oh man. I mean, I think what scares me, what scares me is the same as anyone else, is that can you make an impact within the time that you're given? Because none of us, not to be too freaky, but none of us really know how long that timeline is. And so can you make it within the time that you're given? I think what excites me about it is it's really just an abundance mindset to the core, right? Like wealth is abundant, time is scarce. And so in the end, whether it's, Oprah, or if it's the Pope, or if it's a president, like everyone has the same 24 hours in a day. And like the way they carve up and prioritize those days will ultimately determine what impact they have on those around them. And think that I get up in the morning with, excitement to be able to go and try to make a bigger impact, at least on the people that we talked about so far in the world. And then that's just a choice. It's a choice that anyone has. And I hope that other people take away at least one little ounce of inspiration to go do that for their own situation.
If you could design a hardcover coffee table book for your children and generations to come, what would it include?
It would include embarrassing stories, embarrassing stories of their parents, but the ones that ultimately led to the biggest learnings. And I think that why those things, everyone likes to laugh at their parents. That's easy. But you nailed this earlier, I think, which is like experiences in life and knowing that, like in your family, there's lessons that could have been passed, but they're not. And why aren't they? I don't know. People are busy. Life is busy. It's hard to take time to go do those things. And so my coffee table book would be stories and anecdotes with maximum vulnerability, matched with equal amounts of education and the results.
That is sweet. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to share, such as your website or latest projects?
Yeah, well, if folks are interested in investing, in checking out our investing club, we have a passive investor club for self-storage, multifamily deals, et cetera. It's for accredited investors, but all they have to do is reach out and set up a time with me. It's at madisoninvesting.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, so I'm pretty active on there if they want to reach out that way. But this has been awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Angelina.
Yeah, I know that we have to close at the top of the hour. I do definitely want to take a moment to say thank you for speaking into your best life and business lessons, because it does take enormous character and reflection to go back and to look at your past and to be able to pull from the best of it, the worst of it, and then be able to give the language to it. Because some people, they stay just sometimes shell shocked, or they don't want to do the emotional work. So I just appreciate that. I think some of the things you spoke into regarding some of your best lessons is, your education through podcasts and books, but it's also the time blocking out that you were willing to do it, not knowing that, where is this going to lead me? It's just the fact that you sat down and you said, I'm just going to invest this time. And also your willingness to collaborate with mentors, your contrarian thinking to be able to question everything and anything, delving, past and beyond your comfort zone, I think is also just a valuable gem, because people love their comfort zone. And if you really ask them to go beyond it, the older that they get, the harder it is, because it's like, don't take away my security blanket. It's all I know. And yet there could be this glorious adventure on the other side of, the next best thing, but we have to let go and know that it's not going to kill us to speak at that stage with hundreds of people and to,
That's where it starts.
It's where it starts. Yeah, it's the things that the moments that take our breath away, but it's real life because it's like, yeah, the roller coaster is going to start now, and you can't be. But some people cling to that starting gate, and they're like, I'm not going to leave.
Yeah,
Yeah,
be like, it'll be okay.
yeah, and just the vulnerability and what you spoke about getting over your own fears, and so thank you for being so transparent.
Yeah, thank you for asking great questions. Really appreciate the discussion.
So I'm going to read my closing paragraph real quick, and then we should be able to close at the top of the hour. Okay. So, in closing, I'm Angelina Carlton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder of Two Legacy Planning, a boutique coaching and advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, but international in those I advise. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person, you, define, develop, and execute your legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat or moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're listening on Apple, please remember to rate and review. Or if you're checking us out on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us this week. And thank you, Spencer, for speaking into your legacy.